All right, good afternoon, everyone. All right, let's bring it in. I hope that everyone enjoyed your lunch. Hello once again, guests. My name is Joseph Lowe. I'm an executive member of the Canadian Club Toronto and your host today. Thank you once again for joining us. Our club takes great pleasure in bringing you dynamic and engaging speakers who address the issues of the day. The future of education for today's students is an exceptional example. Ontario's Education Minister will speak to this issue shortly. First, I would like to acknowledge today's event sponsor, Waste Connections of Canada, for their generous support. They are represented here today by Izzy Abrams. Thank you. Now let me introduce our speaker. The focus in schools used to be on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Changing marketplace demographics, the transformational impact of technology, and the globalization of work mean that those entering the job market in the future need different skills and competencies. Doubtless, reading, writing, and the ability to do math will always matter. The focus is shifting to prepare students to be global citizens who have life skills to navigate technology, to make smart financial decisions, and to interact with the rich diversity of the world around us. The Ontario Ministry of Education is working to ensure that this generation of students is future ready. Leading the charge is Stephen Lecce, Minister of Education, MPP for King Vaughan. As Minister, he is working to build an education system that is equipped to support students for future success. Minister Lecce has been involved in politics for almost 2 decades. Past roles include serving as chief spokesperson for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He also served as deputy government House Leader and parliamentary assistant to the Premier. This afternoon, Minister Lecce is joining conversation with Adrian Batra, Editor-in-Chief of the Toronto Sun and Director of Canadian Club Toronto. Adrian and Minister Lecce, I turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're running a touch behind, so we're going to make sure that we keep the minister's answers concise, and we'll get as many as we possibly can. We will take questions from the audience. There will be people from the Canadian Club who will happily bring some questions up to us. I will endeavor to get to them. Mr. Minister, welcome.
Thank you.
There are a few hundred people downstairs that are not very happy with your government. You have a few people in this room who are union leadership, and I'm sure that the very kind staff here at the Royal York will happily clear some tables. You can start negotiating right here and right now. What would you say to them? What do you want to say?
Well, I'd say it's time that we get a deal, and the students of this province should be in class, Adrian. I think this escalation has happened far too often in our province. I would argue that I'm not the exception to the rule, nor is Premier Ford. I think there's not much in common ideologically with Bob Rae and the social contract and the common sense revolution of Mike Harris and every premier thereafter, but this happens too often in Ontario. And I think students deserve to have predictability. The aim of the government remains squarely on getting a deal. And the fact that I've heard that the teacher union leaders have opted to escalate again next week, knowing that there's still a pathway to consider private mediation, to invoke an option that makes sense, that worked with CUPE just months ago, and that would help us end the impasse that is upending so many young people's lives, I think is an irresponsible choice. And my hope is, should there be present, is to hear the message that there is an option, a viable mechanism, an independent mediator that can help us drive the parties to an outcome that is defensible for all of the students of this province.
Everybody has something that they would like to say with respect to this. And there is no question this is extraordinarily difficult on all families. And it's difficult on teachers. It's a strain on the education system.
Yep.
From the perspective of those that are watching this from the outside, it is a monetary issue. It's about classroom sizes. It's about all-day kindergarten. It's about e-learning, which I want to touch on in a moment.
Sure.
At what point does your government say, all right, enough is enough, and back to work legislation is issued?
Yeah, I think the government has been clear that we want to end the impasse. I mean, parents have been overwhelmingly clear that they want all the parties to be reasonable and to stay focused to get deals. The government, I think, has demonstrated in word and in deed that we're committed to that outcome, because a student in this province should not be in the midst of this debate. I think for me, what is most distressing is that students who have not created this problem, their parents have not exacerbated this problem, and yet somehow we see so many young people whose lives are being upended academically. We now have, report cards not being completed in full. There's obviously impacts with respect to extracurriculars and other experiences that really undermine their learning experience. So the point is, for the coming days and weeks, our aim is to redouble our efforts, but it is to consider private mediation as a means to drive the outcome that the parents, the students, and I would argue, yes, in fact, the teachers of this province want, which is a voluntary settlement that provides predictability for all the parties in this province.
You are arguably one of the best communicators this government has put forward on any file, and regardless if we agree with you politically or not, I think that no one would argue with that fact. However, your government is still, when you look at public opinion polling, is losing the public relations war, as it were, when it comes to whether or not this is about students, whether or not this is about money, whether or not this is about actually the future of education, which I promise I will ask you about, because that is why we invited you here to the Canadian Club. Right. But this is far more important, far more timely. Sure. So why is it you are unable to penetrate through that notion that the government is the bad guy in this?
Well, respectfully, I think the population overwhelmingly gives support to the government on ensuring that the system of hiring this province is predicated on merit, not on seniority. There is overwhelming consensus in the public that they want the government to hold the line on the 1% on compensation, a fair increase for all public servants, and for the educators of this province and their workers that we value. We believe we want to retain talent in this province. I mean, the fact is the population supports the government's commitment and the commitment made on the maintenance of full-day kindergarten in this province, a model that is working for the students of this province. So the point is, I would respectfully submit that on the core issues that define this debate, among many, I think the population is saying, the people of this province are saying that the government needs to demonstrate an element of resolve to ensure that we make the case that if new dollars go into the system of education, if we're going to add incremental dollars in the system, I would submit most parents would agree that they'd rather see more schools built, more investment in mental health, more investment in math education, than more investment in compensation above the 1% we're offering. It's a $1.5 billion impact sector-wide. And in a world of finite resources, I am not going to raise taxes on working people, on low-income families and seniors to offset an increase for folks who are objectively well-paid. In OSSTF's case, as has been cited, they're making in and around $92,000 a year. So the point is, we're offering a fair increase. We think that is a pathway that is standing up for the taxpayer of the province, and I think people expect us to do that in this negotiation.
And the public opinion polling has shown consistently that the public does believe there is a fair compensation package that they receive already. But I want to push on one particular issue. We've all heard the ads. We've all seen the signs, and as I said, there's hundreds of them out front right now, protesting your presence here today. And it says, cuts hurt kids. What is your government cutting? Specifically, what has your government cut in education, in the classroom, in and around funding for our public system?
Well, I appreciate the question because it allows me just to categorically rebuke the narrative. Our government, under the Premier's leadership, has increased expenditure in public education to the highest levels ever recorded in Ontario history. That happened in our first budget, and we are on track to spend $1.2 billion more this year than we did last year. We are spending $500 million in this province to build new schools after inheriting $15 billion of a deferred maintenance backlog in our schools. $200 million to lift math scores after, under the former Liberal government, we saw math scores stagnate due to a form of learning, math-based learning, notice discovery math. We are increasing investments in mental health. In fact, I was proud as minister in the first 90 days of my ministry, an issue that I'm personally committed to as minister and as a generational public servant. We more than doubled mental health funding in this province because we believe there needs to be a compassionate level of support for those who are vulnerable in our schools. More than doubled it, hired 180 psychologists and psychotherapists. These are the types of investments that I think are going to make a difference. And the fact is, we are going to continue in successive budgets to invest more in public education. We are defending it. We are maintaining the integrity of the system and the sustainability of it. And I think that is really important when people know on mental health, on special education, an issue at the table. We've increased investments at the highest levels recorded ever, $3.1 billion. In transportation, French language, and Indigenous education. In each and every example I've cited, the numbers of contribution is up, and it's because the government philosophically believes from health and education on social services, we're the party that's going to protect them for the next generation.
With all due respect, Mr. Minister, that may all sound very reasonable and logical, but what they are feeling on the ground is quite the opposite. That per student funding is not increasing. Per student funding has been capped and not stayed the same. So that is where you are getting this pushback, and then it's not an unfair argument. It's a strained system. There's never going to be enough money. So perhaps this is your opportunity then to talk about what does the future of education look like.
We seek a system where we continue investing more in education. That's our commitment. It's what we've done in the budgets of the past, what we're going to continue to do in the budgets of the future. Maintain a commitment to public education in the province. However, we also believe, and outside of the monetary investments, there's ways we can improve the system to make it work for students. And largely in education, the system has in part been designed by and for the unions of this province. A case point, for example, is a regulation in schools, Regulation 274. It is a regulation that was provided under a former iteration, a former agreement under the Liberals in 2012 to the teachers' union sort of as a concession to get a deal. That regulation permits 100% of hiring for new teachers in this province predicated on seniority in a union, not on the premise of qualification, specialty, knowledge in the subject area, not on equity considerations. That is not actually in the interest, I think, of students. What we seek is to build a system that works for students. That's why when it comes to areas like mental health, as I've cited, we've not just increased investment, we've more than doubled it. The system needs to ultimately work for students in Ontario, and I think for many young people who've pursued it, they want to make sure, and their parents, that they have access to the best educator possible. On curriculum, I believe that we have a solid system of education in Ontario, but I'm not a complacent person. I expect better for our students. We don't have a labor market alignment of the competencies and skills we're teaching our young people with the job market opportunities that exist, and reconnecting that alignment, making sure that we give young people those skills that they could utilize in the job market is critical. And that's another area of improvement. It doesn't require investment per se. It requires a strategy to modernize the system to give young people every single access to jobs and opportunity in Ontario.
The mounting criticism against your government, and particularly with the negotiation, has been that you have been constantly asking for a private mediator. Right now, what has happened is they have a mediator appointed by the Ministry of Labour. Mm-hmm. But you want a private negotiator. Why is that? Because the unions are pushing back against that. There's a reason why they're pushing it back against that. What is your rationale for that aspect, and why is that so important to your government?
Well, what's important for the government and what the metric of success is keeping kids in class. And when I hear stories each and every day of parents who've reached out to me personally through social media and other ways, expressing their frustration and the hardship economically on them. When I hear a single mother that reached out to tell me that she's now used almost every single one of her vacation days, it underscores the point that these strikes are hurting kids. And so my hope is through a voluntary agreement, we could avoid further impacts on students in Ontario. But private mediation is a fair process to get a deal. And to be quite frank, with CUPE, when we reached a similar impasse with the Ministry of Education mediator, we invoked private mediation, and it worked. It forced the parties to move to get to a deal. And that's ultimately what parents care about. It's what the students of this province deserve.
I want to talk about another sticking point, and that happens to be with the e-learning. The unions and the teacher unions have been vocally opposed to any notion of e-learning. Right. And I will ask the question that I think they would like to ask to you. Why impose something you've done no research on? You have not given any indication as to where e-learning has worked in perhaps other jurisdictions. Why not try a pilot project? Why not, and then perhaps see what the numbers look like, how students are doing, how teachers are doing? Why would you just arbitrarily impose that on them immediately without a potential pilot project?
Yeah, I think the mandate or the sort of impetus for considering online learning is about sort of appreciating that we want to make sure we're going where the puck is when it comes to the future of jobs and learning in this province. Young people in this province, when you say what is sort of driving this interest, I mean, each and every year since 2011, without exception, there's been a 16% net increase on an annual basis of students choosing voluntarily online learning. There's a value proposition. It diversifies the course offerings in schools that otherwise wouldn't have access to many of those courses. We are providing a way of embracing the skill sets that many job creators, both the public and private sector, have said they want to see more of, which is transferable skills and technological fluency. This is a pathway, we believe, that could help further strengthen young people's marketability. When you go to college, when you go to university, I was just earlier today at the automotive skills competition for high school students across Ontario. Many of them are learning online. Many of them will embrace that form of learning in apprenticeship training. The fact is, it is a way of life when it comes to education. And so if we can add more courses, if we could ensure high-speed internet at every high school in Ontario in September 2020 when the program is to commence, if we could ensure that the courses do not require internet in order to use them at homes, which we have, we create a system that is not just equitable, that gives young people access to courses and a gold standard of courses. A gold standard of courses that I think raise the bar of teaching in this country when it comes to online learning. So we think it could complement learning, it provides strengths, and more importantly, we think it is something that young people want. And when you see the numbers, the data points, I think that helps underscore that.
So what is the hang-up? Why the pushback? I mean, perhaps that's a question we should ask them.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of forces out there that oppose any form of change to the system, any opposed to reverting to a system of hiring premised on qualification. These are things that people will be culturally opposed to. I cannot speak to their motive. I can tell you what we're trying to do, which is transform a system in Ontario that is good, that should be great. And I want to make Ontario a better place for young people so that they can go through the journey of learning with confidence, Adrian, that they could get access to a good paying job. That's the mission of the ministry. It's why I think in part I'm here. And as a generational public servant, I think it is important that all of us try to modernize education in a way that's going to give young people the capacity to access good jobs in the marketplace.
So your government inherited a multi-billion-dollar deficit. We can quibble on how big or little that or whatever it was, but it's a significant number in the billions. At what point do we just acknowledge that any of the negotiations, regardless of if it's with the teacher unions, other public sector unions, that there is a significant component that your government needs to save money? And that is what we're staring down. Because if a contract is imposed upon you, which is possible, it could be far more expensive than what you're trying to currently fight for.
Look, I've made clear, and I've said in the legislature, I do not believe that this is a fiscal exercise. This is a plan where we're trying to improve education by adding more dollars to the system, but it's getting greater return on the investment. It's optimizing your tax dollars. And I think you have a role to play. Parents and students and taxpayers in this province should be in the driver's seat of public policy decision making. On the point of the deficit, look, at a macro perspective, I find it most intellectually problematic that we have the largest transfer of debt, intergenerational transfer of debt known in our country, in our province, under the former Liberal government when they chose to double the debt, imposing $1 billion of interest every single month that otherwise could be put into social services that parents and students and our seniors deserve. And that's the choice that we now are left with, an option of more debt or more investment. And so we choose to a prudent plan to return to balance, but investments in health, in education, in the social services that matter to families in this province, we are going to continue to spend more. We're going to continue to expect more from the system in Ontario.
So there is, I do a lot of these chats, and I usually have 1 or 2 cards. I have 200 here. And thank you for writing clearly so I can read them. So this is an audience question, and I think it touches on something that you already addressed, but it's asking for more clarification. Children with special needs also need to be prepared for tomorrow's jobs. How does decreasing support, EAs, et cetera, actually help prepare those kids?
Well, it's precisely why in the QP negotiation we increased support and hiring hundreds more EAs in the classrooms of this province. It's why under this government we've increased special education funding to $3.1 billion, which is the highest recorded ever in public accounts in our budget. It is precisely why we doubled the mental health portfolio, where there's obviously some mental health challenges that will impact those with special needs. Children with special education needs, those with exceptionalities should know with confidence that they should see themselves reflected in their schools, in their curriculum, and in their government. We're proud of them. We want to see them succeed. And for many of them, I think part of what's lost in the public discourse is how these young people succeed after their journey in school. When it comes to social housing, when it comes to employment. And for many of these people, many of whom I've met, so many of whom I care deeply about, I want to make sure that there's a greater linkage between what I do in the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Colleges, Universities, and Training, the three of us, working together to find pathways for them into the labor market. That is a dignified opportunity, and as you will know, particularly in the tech sector, among others, children with autism, among others, within the special education community, are some of the best workers, and they add value. It's not a. It's. And it's why I think we need to continue to invest in those children. And in the QP negotiation, which we ratified, I guess, a few months ago in the fall, we actually helped agree to over 1,000 workers being brought into schools. Hundreds of them are EAs. That's going to make a difference. And the journey continues to invest in these kids.
Your government decided to take a pretty, I don't know how unprecedented of a move it was to financially compensate parents for time that they lost during the ongoing rotating strikes. Why did your government do that?
Well, I just think philosophically, the parents of this province didn't create the problem, nor did their children. Why should a single parent or a low-income family or a newcomer to this province, or any parent of any experience, be on the hook financially when they have done nothing wrong? It's one thing to upend their life. It's one thing to have them take a vacation day or not get paid to go to work that day to watch their children. It's another thing to have them actually have an incremental cost. So what's happening is on the days where the teacher unions choose to withdraw service for that full day, all four unions will rather save the government about $60 million. And so the decision point was to allocate a critical mass of that back to parents, up to $60 per child. And I can report that over 550,000 people have taken us up on that offer. And I believe it is an important thing. Yes, there's precedent. It happened in British Columbia under Premier Christy Clark. It's happened under the PCs of this province. The fact is, look, it's not about looking at other provinces or jurisdictions. It's about embracing the principle that if the government can even incrementally help a parent through the difficulty of this teacher union escalation, then I think we should. And those that oppose it, I can't speak to why anyone would want us not to help a working parent out on the interim, put a few bucks in their pocket.
I really want to get to some of the questions that have been posed by the audience because they're very thoughtful. I'm going to pivot away from what the ongoing labor negotiations are and ask just a few other education-related questions that I think are important. We have a question here that asks, of course, about skilled trades. By 2021, the skilled trades are going to be a significant part of those getting jobs in Ontario. For those that are looking in the sector right now, I know your colleague, Minister McNaughton, has announced a number of initiatives when it comes to skilled trades. So how are you connecting those youth with these skilled trades? There's an easy one for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the question. Look, the skilled trades is an area of priority for the government and for myself. When you look at sort of the challenges on the economic landscape of this country, what are the existential challenges we face as a federation, as a province? It is access to skilled labor. It is one of the greatest challenges businesses will face is accessing that talent. And we have an opportunity in this province to nurture it and to produce it and to destigmatize the jobs associated with it. Yesterday, I was with my colleague Lindsay Park at the nuclear plant in her riding. These are overwhelmingly are skilled trade jobs, high paying, highly dignified jobs that are not of your grandfather's or my grandfather's generation. And so I think we have a duty and opportunity to embrace them. The fact is many of them are entrepreneurial based jobs. And I think the other value added when it comes to the skilled trades is that we have an opportunity to incent more young women to enter them. The fact that less than 5% of skilled trades are filled by women is a huge lost opportunity. And we have an opportunity with new Canadians, and particularly with women, to have them embrace that career path where they can do incredible things. The fact is we have a vacancy of jobs today, and we have a mismatch in our economy. We have this unusual juxtaposition of jobs without people and conversely people without jobs. And it is bizarre that in a province that has a 29-year unemployment rate low, which is a good thing, over 300,000 net new jobs created since we formed office, overwhelmingly private sector, overwhelmingly full-time, The fact is we need to better align the skills that exist with the jobs that exist. And if we do that, we can reduce the twice average youth unemployment rate in this province. How is it that in this prosperous democracy, twice the rate of unemployment for young people? And yes, it requires generational people to make that point. And so we want to remediate that number. We want to improve the sustainability, the success of our young people, because I think for many of us, if I could be so bold, Adrian, young people in the province.
Not me.
Well, okay. I was using a
appreciate
collective
that.
expression here, but the point is, for those of us and for your children and grandchildren who feel that promise, that the light that existed of opportunity, the opportunity society that maybe some of you yourself or your parents or grandparents came to this country seeking, I think that needs to be reignited in the heart and spirit of people. And we can give young people that path, that they could own a home, God forbid, in the community they were raised, or have the dignity of a job related to their skills. These are not lost, these are not theoretics. This should not be an abstraction. This should be the pathway of every child, including those with special needs in the province. And that's why we're embracing the skilled trades as a viable career.
We just have a few short minutes left. So I have a feeling I know who asked this question. You're going to like this one. This is another easy one for you.
Okay.
Mr. Minister, I understand that you are friends with John Baird. Should he run for Conservative leadership?
I can only assume who asked that question.
Why don't you make some news here?
Look, I am focused on the negotiation. No, honestly, my mission as Minister of Education during this time is to stay squarely focused on the negotiation. However, what I will say is I've known John Baird as a cabinet minister, as a statesman, as a public servant, one of the youngest ministers ever elected in Ontario history. He's a principled Conservative, he's a decent man, and I know he will serve the people of Canada should he choose that path. And I really would encourage him to consider it. But in the meantime, while he makes that decision, I'm going to stay squarely focused on my mission, which is to keep kids in class, get deals, and improve education for the people of Ontario.
Okay, let's get back right to that then in our very short few minutes that we have left.
Yeah.
There's a question from the floor. You mentioned something called Regulation 274, and it sounds a bit wonky. I get it. But so the question would be, what are the misconceptions regarding Regulation 274?
Well, I mean, I think just to contextualize what it is, because you're to the way you phrased it, it is a bit wonky.
No idea.
But it shouldn't be an abstraction. Let me just contextualize what this is. There is a regulation that essentially mandates principals when they have to hire educators in their schools. They provide a list of 5 names. That's based on seniority alone. Seniority guides the decision point. Now, of course, all educators are certified through the Ontario College of Teachers. They're all ostensibly, they're all merit-based. They're hardworking. They pursue their education. That's not the point. The point is, how do we best ensure a principal retains the authority to hire the best educator according to their teachables and competencies and knowledge with the class subject matter that they're supposed to educate on? And I believe it is in the public interest. It is in the student's interest. It will not be in the interest of the union, but it will be in the interest of the student to make the case that some reform, even incremental, is going to benefit students' access to the best teacher for the right job. There have been assertions made in the public by many young teachers that they believe it can impede their ability to move up in the ranks. But the bottom line is, for me, it's about moving to a system where merit is the guiding principle. And I think parents in this province want the government to make the case that that reform is necessary and needed.
At what point and how much political damage is your government willing to take with an election just 2 short years away?
Well, look, we see this through the lens of how to reduce the impacts on students. That's really what matters. And so to your question, I think we hope we can deliver a resolution that is a win-win-win outcome for all the parties. And to be fair, we've signed 2 deals. One as recently as December that's now been ratified with the Education Workers Alliance of Ontario. And I would submit that in those 2 cases, but QP being the more notable one, we got a win-win-win outcome. All parties got something that they can live with. And that, no deal is perfect. But I'd rather a deal that keeps kids in class, that allows incremental progress for all the parties. And that's what I hope we can do as expeditiously as possible, because too many parents have made it clear that enough is enough. And I hear them. It's not lost on the Premier. It's not lost on myself. And obviously, we endeavor to bring this to an end, because parents deserve the parties working. They deserve the parties looking at every option to get a deal, and one of which very much includes private mediation, which I'm calling on them to consider today.
Well, I can assure you, everybody in this room wants a deal done, and a reasonable and a fair deal for everyone involved. Mr. Lecce, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I would like to call Joseph.
Minister Lecce, on behalf of Canadian Club Toronto, thank you for outlining your government's plans to create a successful future for students. And we know that the classroom of today must adjust and respond to the marketplace of the future. It requires our students to be technologically savvy, financially literate, and emotionally intelligent. As you mentioned, curriculum changes need to keep step with these changes. At the same time, the focus on STEM training needs to continue in order to build a robust pipeline of future well-trained professionals embarking on a journey of lifelong learning. Minister Lecce, we thank you for your commitment to supporting students and young people to be their very best. We are well aware of how busy your calendar is, especially of late, and so we are particularly grateful that you found the time to share your insights of your portfolio's priorities with us today. And Adrian, my thanks to you for your thoughtful and incisive moderation of our conversation today. Before we close, I would like to extend thanks once again to today's sponsor, Waste Connections of Canada. I would also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. Thank you for being with us today, everyone. We hope to see you at an event again soon. We are adjourned.